we also do a price survey of funeral homes so that we can let members know, assuming they want a more conventional funeral. And we actually try to break that out into, different types of packages that somebody might be interested in. So we do, we try to do them semi-annually. It depends on how it goes. So we do price surveys. We've also been, and this again was, we had one member who was very interested and for many years sat in on every meeting of the Board of Registrar of the funeral and embalming, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, keeping real tabs on what's happening at the, on the in what's happening on the state level with the industry. And also, we have people, and he has also worked on legislation, and I believe through a current funeral director who's on that board, they may be introducing some legislation to protect consumers in this whole prepaying thing. We also encourage people not to prepay because there are not yet legislative safeguards in place to protect the money that you put in. We haven't had some of the extreme problems that they've had in other states of the money just disappearing or having, but there are cases where, particularly if it's a long time ago, at the time that they are interested in, that someone has actually died, sometimes, well, that casket's no longer available and we don't do it this Sunday, so there are all these extra costs that were not expected. So there isn't the protection on that. And and also if you want to, say you move and you want to transfer to another funeral home. Sometimes we had a case in Massachusetts where they didn't want to give up the money to, to move. So there needs to be some, so there are legislative issues that we get involved in. And the price survey. And in addition to the price survey of funeral homes, last year I did the first, we did a survey of crematories because of this interest in some people wanting to do direct cremation and take themselves. And this is not because of state law, but this was because of the policies of the crematories. We only found 2 in Massachusetts that will deal with individuals directly. And even those, you have to call ahead, you have to make an appointment, you can't just arrive with a body. But anyway, so we're really about, as Emma said, just trying to have as much information out there for people to make whatever decisions they want. And also, as she said, there's a lot of these different steps. We used to talk about, there's what happens between death and the final disposition, usually being cremation or body burial, but then we're now getting into things that are beyond what you do with that. After you've had the cremation, what do you want to do with the ashes? That's a whole other question you can get into. And what are the legal ramifications of that? But anyway, back to caring for your, so this time between whether you decide to do cremation or a body burial in a cemetery, you still have what happens to the body in those few days before that. You can't cremate a body immediately because once a body's cremated, there's no evidence left. So you have to have a sign, it has to be at least 48 hours, and the medical examiner has to sign off that there's no reason to suspect any suspicious reasons for the death. So you've got a body. Is it going to go directly to a funeral home? Some funeral homes have refrigeration, some do not. Some are going to want to embalm if they're going to keep the body there for a while. Or you may want to keep the body at home. So there are all these different kinds of options. I got involved because of my interest in this whole business of caring for your own. And it's not going to be an enormous percentage of people who decide to do the whole thing themselves. But for those who want to, we'd like to make that information available. And there's quite a bit of information, detailed information on our website if you wanted to do that. And you can always call and talk to me or one of us who knows about this. You've got to cool the body down, particularly the central torso, because that's where all the organs are and that's where the heat of the body stays. If it's in the winter, open a window, turn the heat down. If it's in the summer, turn the air conditioner on. We have often used dry ice in the past, but there's a new product out called Techni-Ice, and it's great. You put this thing in water, and it absorbs all this water. You put it in the freezer, and then you can use it to, pack around the body, and you have a whole bunch of them, And then as it thaws some, then you put it back in the freezer. It's very reusable. It's sort of like a friend of mine in Switzerland, when her husband died, they used frozen peas. It's the same sort of idea. It's frozen in a plastic. It's easier to work with than dry ice, which, as you may know, burns you. So there's that. There's maybe washing the body may or may not be necessary, but it's a nice thing to do, and dressing the body. And there's just there's something about being involved in that process for those who want to. I mean, some people don't want to, but for those who want to let them know that is an option. And sometimes at the time of a death, people want to be able to do something. And so, you know, some people can cook some food, and some people can care for the body, and some people can go to the Board of Health in the town and do the paperwork if they choose to do that themselves as well. It's not that hard to do, but somebody's got to do it. And as Emma pointed out, because so few people do this, there are some towns who haven't had anybody try to do this in a long time, and the Board of Health, even though somewhere on their shelves gives them guidelines as to how to do this with an individual, if they've never done it, they might say, but I always deal with the funeral director. I can't just do it with you. So you have to sort of make those kind of plans ahead of time. So there's that task, and but there can be something about just having the time with the body and at home, which is usually a more comfortable place for people to be than at a funeral home, unless they're really uncomfortable with the idea of a dead body. But I had a friend whose mother died, and they just left her body in her bed, and they did the various paperwork and stuff. Her cat was on the bed with her, and family came and just had a chance to say their goodbyes, and then they transported her to the crematory the next day. Others, in many cultures, it's traditional to have a body at home for 3 days. Some people think either the soul or whatever in various religions doesn't actually totally leave the body at the moment we consider a body to be dead medically. And people who've been around a dead body say, when they first die, it's hard to realize that this person is dead, and they look like they're just asleep or something. This is an expected death at home. But after a couple days, the blood has sunk to whatever's the lowest part at the back. It's a little bit whiter, a little waxier, and there's a sense that this person you knew is no longer there, and it's sometimes easier to let go of the body at that point. Again, not for everybody, but this is what happens in many cultures, and what we just want people to know that is an option. There's an excellent video that was made maybe 5 or 6 years ago. What do you think, Judith? That is actually available from Netflix. It's called A Family Undertaking. It's about an hour, and it shows families in many different styles of life actually doing this. And for anybody who's interested in caring for their own at home, I really would advise you to look at this video because it just makes it more real, and it makes it less scary, and you just see people doing it, and it feels real. There are these, there's the paperwork. I don't know if we want to get into that kind of detail. Basically you have to go to the Board of Health in the town where the death occurred. And then actually in Massachusetts, almost a quarter of the deaths occur in Boston because so many people end up dying in a hospital. So it means going to the Boston Board of Health. But that's where you go. Well, you get the death certificate, which is signed by the doctor, and then you take that to the, and then you have to fill in a portion of it. If you don't do it and you use a funeral director, they fill it in, but they're going to have to ask you because all the information is information the family has. And there's a very particular way to fill it out, but it can be done. Goes to the Board of Health, and then you receive what's called a disposition or removal permit. It was originally, it used to be called a burial permit, but it's because not everyone's being buried now, they changed the name. And that allows you to transport the body, and that's what you would present either to the crematory or to the cemetery. So it's not that complicated. There are a couple other forms. If you are cremating, as I mentioned, you need to get the medical examiner to sign off. So that will be done, it depends. In Eastern Mass, it often actually happens at the crematory, but then this form has to go in. And then there's another form which is not required by law, but if you are contemplating cremation, you want to get, and these forms you get from the crematory, and that's a cremation order, because the crematory wants to protect itself and not have somebody in the family come back later and say, but I didn't want mom cremated, you know, or whatever. So they want to be sure if there's a surviving spouse, it's clear they have the authority to say, you know, this person get. But if there isn't, and they're like 4 kids, and one's in Africa, you need to really, it helps to ahead of time have what's called a cremation order, which is signed, and you identify who has the authority to sign off on the cremation, and it makes it easier at that time. So these are some very practical, sort of nuts and bolts kind of things, but that's the kind of information that FCA can provide for you, and that we've done the research, and we can help you with that kind of information. I think we'll see if there are questions for, is that okay on time?
Yeah. Great. So 1 or 2 brief questions would be great.
What happens if the deceased has donated organs?
Well, that's another thing that you really need to plan ahead on, because you need to have made contact ahead of time with whatever institution is going to get those organs, because the timing on harvesting organs is very critical. It usually happens if someone dies in a hospital. And then, again, you need to be in communication with them, and different institutions have different policies about whether then, and it may depend on what organ is being harvested, organs, because there can still be, you know, I've heard of cases where there still be able to be viewing and whole body burial, but often there's cremation, and sometimes the facilities will actually cover the cremation, but not all of them. So again, it's the kind of thing where planning ahead and being clear. There's some more water. Sorry.
Getting Joe's flu.
No, it's not the flu. I didn't talk so much. Thanks. So I can't remember. Do we still have some stuff on the website about organ donation?
Yeah, I think if it's not a direct link, we certainly had it in the newsletter, I think, in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
so.
and all the newsletters are archived on the
website.
yeah. So.
How many members do you have?
Well, that's been changing because there was a very small group in southeastern Mass around the New Bedford area, and basically one person was keeping that going, and she got in a situation where she can no longer do it. So they've kind of folded, so we've taken their members in, and a similar kind of thing is happening on the Cape, and we're not sure yet whether they're joining us or whether they're going to...
Over 1,000?
A couple thousand.
A few thousand, okay.
And we are, I don't know how many you have in Western Mass, but definitely we're...
700.
Yeah, so the Eastern Mass one is definitely the biggest in the state.
And these are renewable memberships that people keep sending in the $30? Or?
No, it's a one-time fee.
Oh, I see. Okay, right.
Of $30. It's a real. We do a bit of fundraising because even though we're an all-volunteer organization, we do have the cost of a newsletter, the mailing, and maintaining the website and the phone and a few other things. It's a very low-budget operation, I assure you, but we've managed to stay solvent.
I don't know if you're the best one to ask this question to, but there's a lot of talk about what feels right, and I'm just wondering, do most people know what feels right to them, and also do people's expectations of what feels right now match up with what feels right in the moment when they're having to deal with this dead body?
I can't answer that last question, but I don't know that everybody knows what feels right, but our aim is to let people just to have people begin to think about it, and that could potentially lead to them having a sense of what I think would feel right for me, rather than arriving there and having something just sort of start happening that definitely doesn't feel right. And there could be conflicts within a family. Somebody may want something very different than someone else, but you don't want to be dealing with that at the time of the death. So you want to try to work, that's this communication thing, and really work that out ahead of time, so you don't have a you know, a tug of war about what we're doing at the time.
I think Ruth's gonna